music is so crucial. It's the way that I truly like express myself. I feel like you can't reach out to someone just because you don't really know them.
I'm so excited. Finally, welcome to the Pros on Process stage. I'm so excited to have you here. I've been a fan of yours since high school. We dabbled in all the activities together, from competitive speech and acting to musical theater and contest play. And it's just so exciting to see that you've really grasped onto your God-given talent and turned it into an incredible career. So welcome to the stage. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I want to just get straight into it. Talk us through how you got your beginnings in music. That's the fondest memory I have of you, being in like our speech coach's room and you're like belting ballet for everybody. Talk to us a little bit about where you honed your craft, how you got support early on, and ultimately describe the catalyst for doing this full time.
Yeah, so, oh God, levels. Like, performance has always been in me, but it wasn't until probably like I was, I think 12, or maybe it was even earlier than that, like 11. I was like, I really want to start auditioning for musical theater specifically. And I wanted to kind of, yeah, like focus on performing in front of audiences in that kind of way. And then, through high school and like through us meeting each other too, I like continued on that journey. And then it came time for me to kind of like figure out what it was I was going to do with my life. College, happened. And I actually had decided that I was going to cut music out and I was going to just do straight theater. And through that journey, I kind of realized like music is so crucial for me. It's so important to me, and it's the way that I truly like express myself and move through the bigger moments in my life. And so by cutting it out, I kind of like came to that realization, so it wasn't like this bulletproof, like, perfect journey of like always knowing that this is like what I'm supposed to do. I had to kind of like explore it, and I'm still even like exploring what music looks like for me, but I just know that it's crucial to who I am. I decided that I wanted to go to Chicago because it wasn't as big as New York and it wasn't as big as LA, but it was like a good in between, and it still had that like Midwest like energy. And I also got a scholarship to go to school for theater, so like it just kind of worked out that way. I gravitated towards people who were already kind of a part of that network. Like even a lot of the people that I was acting with and doing theater with, they also were musicians. Like that's also, I mean, that's like the whole thing with being a creative is like a lot of times there are people that have, they do multiple things. So yeah, through the theater, like I met a lot of other people that were already kind of integrated into the underground music scene in Chicago. And the music scene here is like so vast, and it's also really accessible, which is amazing. Like the community like effort here is really unique, and people are always looking to support each other and always looking to collaborate. And so I'm thankful enough that it was like a really easy transition for me to kind of like start really exploring that scene,
Yeah. Were there specific like groups? I don't know. Did you have to Google something like, oh, I want to start an indie rock band, or, like literally tell me how you were able to do that? Because I'm like, all right, I think the first step for me in thinking, okay, if I wanted to pursue something like this, I'd go to my classmates maybe.
Yeah.
But even outside of that, just curious if there were anything like any groups or organizations that kind of lend themselves for artists in the Chicago area that you would recommend.
Totally. Well, first things first, I've personally always had the mindset that like you shouldn't wait for any opportunities to kind of come your way. So if you're having a hard time finding an access point, you make one. So like for me, like my first show was not even in a legitimate venue. Like it was, it was at a bar. It was at a bar in Chicago, but they didn't have a stage. They didn't have anything, but it was like a space. And like me and my friend Chelsea were writing music together, and we were like, yeah, we want to do an EP release show. We don't have anything to show in terms of like really legitimately submitting to more established venues in Chicago and whatnot. But like, we wanted to do this thing, and we were able to find a space that was willing to host us. And I think that's like always been my motto. Like even when I go through phases where I'm not, like right now I'm in this phase of like, I'm going to do a show once every month. That's like a goal that I'm like setting for myself to kind of just continue honing in on my performance craft. And I'm not putting limitations on like where that can exist and what that looks like, because the end goal is just being in front of people and sharing myself with others. So it could be a library, it could be, like I am out here submitting to legitimate venues, but in order to submit to legitimate venues, at least in Chicago, like it is important to have some sort of fan base. It's a lot of people really love it whenever you have an EPK, like an electronic press kit, that has like videos of shows that you've done in the past, and like, press or media clips of like what people have to say about you. They want to see that you have a following, and like, no matter who you are, you should always be submitting, like even if your fans are your parents, like, you know what I mean? Like if you want to perform, you just have to put yourself out there. But also if you're not getting like these venues attention, then make a venue for yourself. And so that's always kind of been my motto. Like I've done basements, I've done homes, I've done patios, I've done like bars that don't do that kind of thing. Like I've just, if someone will give me a space, I will make something happen.
That's a beautiful thing. I think I spent a lot of time in New York curating showcases for artists to have a platform to perform as well. I'm trying to bridge that gap for artists like you, for example, who are just like, throw me on the stage, I got you, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful mentality to have. It's a very important mentality to have in the indie space in general, but as somebody who kind of has to get it out the mud, right? Like there's no roadmap for how you become a successful artist other than just building a genuine audience and getting genuine traction. How does that come to life in a actual situation where you're trying to get on stage at maybe more credible buildings and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, at least here in Chicago, my experience has been just electronically submitting. Like there's some finessing that one has to do. Well, okay.
No, this is the process. The people want to know.
I know the people want to know. So like a lot of, if you go to like right now, I have this running document. Like I have a Google Doc of all of the venues that I can think of in Chicago, ones that are at least feasible for me to perform in, whether they be small or big. And I go on their website, I kind of deep dive, and I find usually sometimes it's in like the FAQ section, or they'll have like a section dedicated to like, if you are an artist and you're looking to submit, like this is where you submit. Now, here's the thing though, is that some of these websites have really generic emails for you to like submit to, which are like talent buying at like blah, 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 or whatever. And I'm like, everyone's submitting to that. That's not the personal email for the talent buyer. So when I see stuff like that, like I'll put that email down. If that's the only email that I can get access to, then like I will submit to it and I will follow up a week later. But I also, now that I've kind of like sort of built out this network, and if I know artists that have performed in those spaces before, even if I don't know them that well, like I will reach out to them on Instagram. And that's something that's really cool about social media, is that like building an artist community kind of in that way of like, I help you, you help me. Like, don't feel like you can't reach out to someone just because you don't really know them. Like always just be putting yourself out there and building those connections, because you never know where they like might be really useful for you and where you can like, yeah, where you can find support. So I will reach out to artists that I know that have performed in those spaces and been like, hey, like, do you know who's doing the talent mine? Do you have their email? Do you like, how did you get this gig? You know, and just kind of like putting myself out there in that way. And then I'll fill that information into my little Google Doc, and I'll like keep track of like, did you email them? Like, did you follow up? Like, you know, that's been my hustle lately.
Yeah. And you mentioned feasibility. So I wanted to go back on that note. When you say feasible, is there a world in which you're paying to perform, or is it, what do you mean by feasible?
Unless I am putting a show on myself, I am usually not spending money out of pocket, unless I am paying my, like, you know, sometimes I have to pay my musicians because the gig is like not, you know, I'm not making a bunch of money from it or whatever. But what I mean by that is like, realistically, based off of my fan base right now, like I'm not going to be out here submitting like to rooms that are bigger than 300 people.
You did mention coming in as like a person who's headlining their own sets, basically. Like, and if that opportunity didn't exist, you were creating your own. Do you have a different strategy for attaching yourself to artists that maybe do have a more prominent audience, or like are a little bit more established? Have you ventured into the land of maybe opening for a bigger ticket artist, or how does that look in your kind of roadmap of growth as an indie artist?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I definitely have my like radar on, because I'm hoping to go on tour hopefully next year. And that is the way in which I would like to go on tour, is like hopefully pairing with someone who, yeah, would want to like go on tour with me, and we would have complementary sounds, and therefore our like fan base could actually translate in a way that like makes sense.
Let us in on who your like dream artist is to open for.
I don't even know. Oh my gosh, I don't even know. Like right now, I mean, some of my favorite artists right now that I've been kind of eyeing, that I feel like I could actually realistically open for, are Sir Woman. They're like a really awesome like soul band that writes like really uplifting, groovy music that I think would totally make sense for me to pair with.
Yeah.
And then also Amber Mark. I really love and admire her work. I think that she is killer. And she's also like a really, I mean, she's definitely an indie artist, but she's like not, like, I'm not opening for Beyonce. I'm not looking at Beyonce right now. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make sense. So I'm looking for people that are kind of like mid-range, people that are going on tours for like 300 size, like no more than 800 size rooms. But I'm not, you know, I'm navigating that right now, because I'm like, I don't even know what that process looks like, other than just like throwing stuff at the wall and like hitting people up on social media, and then like if they come to town, trying to like get in the same room, or like find someone who knows someone. It's just like I'm in the dark, you know, like trying to like figure that out. But that is definitely on my radar.
That brings me to a huge congratulations for you and your team on producing the EP Late Night. I've been bumping it and promoting it since it dropped. Do You is my favorite. It's no small feat to put out a project. It takes significant investment, you know, studio time, production, promotion, etc. For people who are interested in like packaging a body of work together in the form of an EP, can you demystify that process a bit? I know there's no one size fits all approach to dropping a project, but from your experience, like questions like, what would you recommend an artist budget for the creation of an EP? How much time does it take to bring to life? What are the moving pieces? Just kind of going into the mind behind producing one of those.
Through my own release, some things that I learned, I spent I mean, just to like demystify the whole thing in terms of like budgeting and all that, like I spent a pretty penny to be in a nice studio to record. And that is something that I think over the past year and a half and working on new things that are yet to be released, I've realized that like you just really need to be working with the right people and people that have good ears. Like, don't feel like you have to go to some like over the top, insanely fancy studio where you're going to be paying like, you know, $3,000 a day. Not that's, I didn't pay that, but like some of the stuff I could have done in my own living room, you know, and it was a matter of just spending more money on like someone who's mixing and mastering, you know, that's really where like everything really, like that's really more important than like the studio itself. So that was something that I kind of like learned, is like I could probably cut a little bit on being in the physical studio, spend more time and attention as to like who I want to work with in terms of mixing and mastering the whole project. And then like, you know, in terms of packaging everything, that was something that I really struggled with because I felt like I needed to like I needed to promote how I really wanted to be perceived. And that was something that I got kind of like caught up with for a little bit, that kind of postponed my project actually, is like being really intense about what I wanted the visuals to look like and making sure that like my energy is translating in those things and all that kind of stuff. And I realized that like I just had to trust myself and know that the energy and the attention to detail that I put in the music itself like speaks for itself. And I don't need to go like over the top. Like, I want to be a perfectionist all the time, but whenever you're doing something that's like organic and of yourself, you kind of have to know like, you know, when to like leave that at the door. So, so in terms of like the marketing and like the visual aspects of releasing a project, I say like trust your gut and trust that people will like see you, and don't worry about like what if they see this or like what if they see that. Like, just be truthful to who you are throughout that aspect of like releasing a project, and trust that like that will translate to your audience or whoever it is that you're trying to reach. And then, I mean, I also paid for press. I thought that was kind of important for me. I went back and forth and I talked to a few different artists about that. Because some people say like it's great and then some people say like it's not, but it was like my first solo project and I'd been a part of other projects before. So I was like, and in the middle of quarantine, not being able to play shows, like I was like, I think that that's something that's essential for me. And I worked with a really awesome PR firm here in Chicago that like focuses on indie artists and also manages some indie artists. They're called Fresh Paint. And they're accessible to pretty much everybody. You pay hourly. And that was, I mean, I'm really glad that I did that because I got a lot of placements, but also it helps with like the EPK and just like submitting to venues and getting people like getting on people's radar. So I would definitely recommend doing that if you're at a place where you like know that this is what you want to do. And you want to like, I mean, build like it's kind of like building a resume for yourself.
And I do think there's a lot of power in what you said earlier about kind of like releasing, you know, at least how you were packaging that project, releasing the need to like feel the need to control how people would perceive it, just like with your authentic truth and knowing that would be enough, right? That your music would speak for it. That's a very powerful thing to do as an artist. And I'm sure it was pretty liberating once you finally saw it out in the world. But all the roles that you play within your own music, you write your own music, you also are a musician in that you can play several instruments. How do you find inspiration for like your lyrics or a melody? How do you kind of tap into that creative mindset where you just start flowing, you know?
No,
really like tap into your true essence of artistry.
So like there's a really intentional way, right? Where it's like today is a writing session day. Like I'm going to work on a specific project and like this is what it's going to be. I'm very careful with that process, the intentional one, because I want to make sure that I'm never creating from a space that feels like inauthentic or feels really hyper forced. Like I walk in the door with a lot of like empathy for myself that today something might not come just because I set that time aside. So like I like to spread that kind of idea because I think that that's really important, because a lot of people who do music or whatever like art think that like it has to be always on, and like every time you walk into a space or any time that you're like working, like you better have something to show for it. And it's like I think that that's a trash mentality, and that's also how you like create work that's just like not close to you. So I have that way though, and sometimes like it flows and I'm very intentional and I go in and I'm like, today I want to write about this topic or like this thing that's like sticking out in my life. And then there's the other like more stream of consciousness way. It's usually when I feel more emotionally raw or like I just feel really open, and I like will pick up my, you know, ukulele or the guitar and I'll just start fiddling and I'll find some chords, and then things just kind of like start flowing out of me. And a lot of the music that I write, pretty much all the music I write, are like I'm always writing to myself. Like I'm not writing to like other people, which is, I know everyone has their own process, but like for me, that's how I am able to access things that feel like more authentic. I'm like singing things that I know I need to hear, which is like, do you know, like do you was like, I wrote that.
Singing those lyrics in my head as you were saying that, and I was like imagining you looking at yourself in the mirror and you being like, do you like,
I
totally had that moment.
Yeah, like I wrote that song at a time where I was like, it was like things hit the fan and it was like, this may really not work out for you. All of these opportunities fell out from underneath you. So what are you going to do? Like, are you going to sulk in it and be sad, or are you going to rise to the occasion? So that's why a lot of my music ends up being like more motivational and more like growth oriented, because I write things that I need to hear. So those are usually the two different ways that I work. It's either like intentional, time is set aside. I'll go into a session with like topics and sounds I want to play with. And then like there's the other way that's like, this is just flowing through me. Like I'm really available. I'm really open. I need to release. And then like something just kind of flows.
Right. That's powerful. I think either way, just knowing how to tap in and get to the truth of like who you are as an artist is important. I love that you said you speak to yourself when creating, and that's how I teach people who I coach to market, allowing the audience to find your authentic self and using that as the base for anything that you build. It's a surefire way to define your true fans, you know, your true audience, and know that you are being real to yourself. And that is half the battle as a creator. I don't want to condemn people that create for others. Like,
right.
But I do think there's a lot more power in defining yourself as your audience and being like, and whoever else likes it, pull up, you know, like that.
Wherever you're living, you like think that you need to like immediately attract like everyone that's around you, or like have that immediate validation of like a fan base or whatever. And so sometimes people can get caught up in that mentality of like, I need to be creating for the people that like are around me or whatever. Your audience may not be in your hometown. Your audience may not be in your like city even, like, but don't feel like you have to change who you are or like be something different, because I guarantee your story is relatable to like people all across the world. It's just a matter of like finding those people.
Exactly. You're going to rely heavily on your localized audience or your cult followers to like perpetuate your music, but eventually it'll land on the right ears if it's for them. And so I love that you have that mindset around what you create. And I'm sure that then allows your work to be a therapy and your headspace is good, and you're navigating the world with an appreciation of the impact that you have on it specifically. So congratulations on even finding that as an artist. A lot of people kind of get caught up, doing it for the clout or whatever, and that can be a very, very different experience as a creative. So I always want to give anyone who I bring to a stage the platform to also kind of plant into people that are coming up. Even though you consider yourself like fairly newer in the space, maybe in the grand scheme of like the duration of your career, right?
Yeah.
There are people that are like fresh out of college trying to do the same thing that you did, or people in high school that are clunking around musical theater and like, what do I do, right?
Yeah.
What bit of advice would you give maybe either to your younger self, if we want to keep in the mindset of like talking to ourselves first, around navigating this space, right? Like things that maybe you wish somebody would have told you as you were transitioning, or, tips and tricks that maybe would have helped kind of sand off a rough edge as you matriculated through your journey?
Yeah. Oh, I love this question. Oh. I think what I would tell myself is that when it comes to the world of art in general, there is no right way to do anything. So when you have these teachers and when you have these like directors, or you have these collaborators that are telling you you have to do something a specific way, and if you don't do it that way, then you're not going to be successful, or you're not going to like make something of yourself, that's trash. It's trash. And I wish I knew that like way younger, so I could more confidently discover who I was instead of searching for the validation from people who are leaders in the industry or whatever. Also, I would just kind of like kindly remind myself that anyone who has been an innovator of anything has been told that they were horrible and has been told that they were wrong for so long before they're recognized for their greatness. And so like keeping that in mind and trusting in the process is so crucial. Even when you're met with a crap ton of no's.
Definite. I think that's going to speak true regardless of if you're early on in your career, if you midway, or if you're experienced. There's always going to be those inputs that you kind of have to like sift through. So sticking true to that and sticking true to yourself is going to help you navigate, but also not being, not being too, it's important to be a sponge, but like,
right.
There is
take
no
it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They're giving you tools, but how you want to use the tools, like from your teachers and your colleagues and all that stuff, that's your choice. That's your choice. You can see what works for someone. You can really identify with it and be like, that really works for me too. But you should not like, I wish that I spent less time stretching myself like overly thin to like reach for things that like didn't really like serve me in the long run, and then ended up like distorting my own self-image, or like kept me away from doing more work on myself and what it is that I want to discover in myself as like an artist and creating and all that. So
I appreciate you giving that advice. I know a lot of people will likely sit with that and kind of know how to move, like shift a few things and potentially change their perspective around how they've been navigating and processing even advice on their own journey. So appreciate you doing that. And want to leave you with the opportunity also to tell people what you're excited about in the future, anything that, you may be working on. I know we talked about your EP. There are usually phases to projects like that. You're still fully marketing that and people can listen to that, but generally where people can find you, view your work, just learn more about you and stay in touch with you and your journey. I think people would love to know that information too.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like You can find my music right now pretty much anywhere you stream music or buy music. I distributed it pretty much everywhere. So Late Night EP by E Woods, you can find it anywhere. In terms of keeping up with me, I'm most active on Instagram. I love that platform in terms of just like visually being able to like reach people, but also just like being able to communicate with people on a deeper level. I usually am just always posting what's going on there, in which you can find me on Instagram at e.woodsmusic. And then in terms of the future, you know, with my big like theatrical background, I'm trying to, now that I've released my first project and I feel really good about it, I am now trying to incorporate all the other facets of me into this next EP that I have. It's written, but it's still like the kinks are being worked out. So I have EP number 2 coming that will have a little bit more theatrical. It'll have more of a theatrical and immersive experience to it, which you will see. And then and then I am going to start working on a full length album in the fall and just kind of challenging myself in that way. So, and then hopefully going on tour next year. That's what I'm like putting out into the universe. Like I'm trying to get out of Chicago, love Chicago, but I have other people that I want to see. So yeah.
I love that. Well, I'm hoping that you come to my city.
Yes.
Yes. We'll have a whole little situation going by the time you're ready to tour. Your venue will be ready. Your audience will be curated. So I appreciate you. This has been incredible, Eve. Like, I'm so excited that I got a chance to tap in with you on your process. Thank you for demystifying parts of your creative process. And thank you all for tuning into Pros on Process. Pros on Process will continue to pull back the curtain on obscure aspects of the creative process. And to the TP tribe, if there are any other questions you wish we could have covered, make sure to leave us a note in the comments below, and we will be sure to try and get a pro to tackle their process as it pertains to your inquiry. In the meantime, subscribe to the channel to stay in the loop, and give this video a thumbs up to let us know to keep them coming. Thanks so much again, Emily, so much for joining us. See you guys next time.
Bye. Thank you.